Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion with respect to VDEM Institute's Democracy Report 2025, which highlights the decline of democracies around the world and the rise of autocratic tendencies. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the precarious living conditions of the gig workers and the need for robust social security systems. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles with a special perspective of UPSC prelims 2025 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of the day, this is with respect to are democracies around the world in the decline mode. We have a particular report by the VDEM Institute, which is Democracy Report 2025. What it says is that there is the rise of autocratic tendencies around the world. Let's try to simplify this. See, we can have different governance framework. Let's say we have a particular system which is quite liberal in nature, right? Then there can be a governance framework which is quite autocratic. Now, see, on what basis I'm classifying these systems? On the basis of the relative freedom which is exercised by the people, right? Or there can be a particular framework, governance framework, which lies somewhere in the between, right? So this is a kind of a spectrum, right? Now, what this particular report is saying is that there has been the rise of autocratic systems around the world, right? So we are shifting more towards the right. Now, again, what you need to understand is that this is a particular survey which is based on public opinion. So you'll have to take this report with a pinch of salt. But this topic becomes really important considering the rise of polarization around the world, considering the rise of aggressive nationalism around the world, right? So this becomes really important. And see, this polarization, this aggressive nationalism is obviously a source of conflict around the world, right? So this topic becomes really important. This is a part of GS2, Indian Constitution, basic structure and international relations. Why basic structure? Because democracy, the representative democracy, is a part and parcel of basic structure. Now, let's go into the report first and then we look at the causes and the way forward. What this particular report says is that the number of closed autocracies have increased in 2020s, reversing the steady decline seen in 1980s. So what it says is, just look at this chart. Now, we have 4 kinds of systems which this report is talking about. The very first is liberal democracy. Second is electoral democracy. Third is electoral autocracy. And fourth is closed autocracy. How to differentiate among these 4? Closed autocracy means where there is absence of multi-party elections, where there is absence of fundamental freedoms. That is what closed autocracy is all about. Then you have electoral autocracy. What it means is that there is the presence of multi-party elections, but there is the absence of fundamental freedoms, right? Then we have electoral democracy. What it means is there is the presence of multi-party elections. There is the presence of these fundamental freedoms, but to a limited extent. Then we have liberal democracy, where what we find is a balance of all 3 organs of the state, be it the judiciary, be it the legislature, be it the executive, exercising their own functions, and ultimately you have fundamental freedoms for all sections of the society, right? So this is what liberal democracy is, and that is how we differentiate among these 4. Look at this particular graph. See that since 1980s, we had a particular decline in the number of closed autocracies, but since 2020s, what we are witnessing is a rise in the closed autocracy. That is what the report is talking about. Now, again, I've already told you that we have this 4-fold classification: closed autocracies, electoral democracies, liberal democracies. Now, one thing which you must know is that India has been classified as electoral autocracy since 2017 according to this particular report. Now, let's go into the other details of the report. Look at South Asia. What it says is that there is no liberal democracy in 2024 in South Asia, right? Afghanistan was included in the list of closed autocracies. Let's talk about sub-Saharan Africa. What it says is liberal democracies shrunk to 6% in 2024. Ultimately, the crux is that there is the decline of liberal tendencies and the rise of autocratic tendencies. Then let's talk about Europe and Central Asia. Liberal democracies have declined from 47% in 2019 to 35% in 2024. we generally think that Europe is the model of democracy, right? And these Western countries, which even our external affairs ministers have said many times, that they portray themselves as the models of democracies. But look at this particular graph. You will see that there is also the rise of autocratic tendencies in the countries of Europe, right? Electoral democracies have increased from 31% in 2019 to 39% in 2024. Then let's talk about West Asia and North Africa. In 2024, no liberal democracies were identified. We already know in West Asia, most of the countries are monarchies, right? And there is very limited fundamental freedom. From 55% in 2019, closed autocracies have further increased to 59% in 2024. What it signifies is the rise of these autocratic tendencies. Now, according to this particular report, what it says is that one of the most important aspects of democracy, which is the fundamental freedom of expression, has seen the highest decline. See, in a democracy, what is really important? That people should be able to express themselves, express their opinion. People should have the right to dissent, right? But when this right is curbed, what we say is that there is the rise of autocratic tendencies. This includes key components such as government censorship on media, on restrictions on academic and cultural expressions, and the harassments of journalists, right? A total of 44 countries, including India, have experienced deterioration in this particular area. Now, next aspect is the growing issue with respect to the disinformation. See, we have misinformation, which is actually fake information. But when the information is made fake on a deliberate purpose to cause chaos in the society, to cause conflicts in the society, that is what disinformation is all about. And disinformation, there have been increasing instances of disinformation around the world, which is this particular report talking about. And again, this is because of the polarization by different governments. What is polarization? You need to understand. Polarization is differentiating different segments of the society on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, on the basis of ethnicity, right? So causing divisions in the society. That is what polarization means, right? Disinformation tactics have been employed in 31 countries, including Georgia, Hungary, India, and Serbia. More widespread is the issue with respect to political polarization. And many countries have witnessed toxic levels of polarization, including India, Peru as examples, right? So whenever you see that there is the deliberate division of society on the lines of religion, on the lines of caste, on the lines of ethnicities, on the lines of language, right? That is what polarization is. And please understand, it is all because of populism, right? It is all because of the toxic politics we have, right? So again, this is a phenomena which is around the world. So these political leaders who try to exploit these divisions in the society just because they want to serve their own selfish motives, right? Additionally, the report notes a sharp rise in the government intimidation of opposition parties. In any democracy, please understand, opposition is really very important. Right? Again, not to cause disruptions in the parliament, not to cause chaos, but for constructive criticism. But again, if you suppress the opposition, that is something which is not a part of democratic principles. Another area of concern is increasing threat to the autonomy of election management bodies. We have also seen there have been allegations that, we had a particular case. We had Banwal versus Union of India, in which the Supreme Court very clearly said that you have to make the selection committee an impartial, an independent committee, right? But again, the government came up with another act, with its own act, so that it can have a dominance in the appointment of the chief election commissioners and the election commissioners, right? So over there, this aspect becomes important. Attacks have been more common in 21 of the 45 autocratizing countries around the world. Now, here we talk about the public opinion, right? So initially I told you that this is a particular survey based on public opinion, so we'll have to take this with a pinch of salt. Now, what it says is that there has been a growing preference for strong leaders who can make decisions without interference, right, from courts or parliaments in some countries, including India. At the same time, there is the support for representative democracy has declined. Now, there are two aspects. One is the kind of support people have for representative democracies, where what they think is that we will elect our representative and he is going to basically cater to our aspirations, right? This is what the support for representative democracy is all about. What the report says is that there has been a declining trend with respect to this aspect. The second aspect which you must understand is that there has been the rise for the demand of the strong leaders around the world, right? Including in India. That is the second aspect which the report is talking about. The chart shows the share of people who say that a system in which representative elected decide what becomes law should be very good, right? So just see, even in countries like Sweden, the share of population which wants representative democracy has decreased from 54% to 41%. Let's talk about Canada, from 43% to 31%. Then just see Nigeria from 48 to 37. Then have Germany 46 to 37. Now see, we have these countries, Sweden, Canada, Germany, right? Then we have India. So the public opinion survey, according to this VDEM Institute, says that there has been the decline from 44% to 36% with respect to the demand of representative democracies. Let's talk about UK. Again, a decline from 43 to 31%. Japan, 22 to 14%. Kenya, 42 to 29%. What it means is that the world over, there is the less demand for representative democracies according to this particular opinion. Let's then talk about the next aspect which I just discussed. That is the demand for strong leaders, right? Percent share of people in which a kind of system they want is with a strong leader who can make decisions without the interference either from the parliament or from the courts, right? That is one very important point. So there has been a continuous rise in the demand of having such a leader who does everything on his own, right? Kind of a superhero, right? And does not give due attention to the parliaments or the courts. Look at this in Kenya. The public opinion says it has risen from 39% to 52%. Let's talk about India. From 55% to 67%. Rise of strong leader, right? Next, South Korea, 23% to 35%. Germany, 6 to 16. Poland, 15 to 25. Argentina, 17 to 27. Again, what this highlights is that there has been a growing demand for strong leaders. Now, next part which you need to understand is, what the report says is that India is a part of both the groups. That is, there is the decline for the demand of representative democracy on one hand, and there is the rise of the demand for strong leaders, right? Again, according to the press freedom, so we have a particular report by Reporters Sans Frontiers, what we call as Reporters Without Borders, right? So this talks about the press freedom. As of 2024, India ranked 159 out of 180 countries surveyed by the Reporters Sans Frontiers. The last time India ranked within the top 100 countries was in 2002. The decline in rankings became steeper since 2022. Just look at this. In 2023, India's ranking reached the lowest 161 out of 180 nations surveyed. This is the kind of freedom which our reporters have, the journalists have, according to this particular report, right? Now, let's talk about what are the causes for this. We have already seen the data, and I told you that this trend is world over. What are the causes attributed? The very first is rise of populism and authoritarian tendencies. World over, be it the developed countries or the developing countries or the least developed countries, what we are seeing is that there is a rise of populist politics, where the politicians are catering to the demand of the people, and the demand of the people is based on populism, right? It is not based on rational demands. There's a rise of fundamentalism in the society. There's a rise of polarization in the society, right? And again, what we are seeing is that there is the excessive centralization, even in those setups which are federal in nature, where there is a specific distribution of power between the regional governments and the central government. What we are witnessing is that there is a centralizing tendency, right? So there is the increase of centralization, undermining the vital institutions, be it the judiciary, be it the election commissions, be it the media, what we call as media. We call media as the fourth pillar of democracy. But what we are witnessing now is that these media houses have been bought by these political parties, right? And what they're speaking is the voice of these political parties. So there is this serious concern. Now, what are the examples which I can quote? So we have Viktor Orban in Hungary, or we have Erdogan in Turkey. So these are the examples. Next aspect is erosion of civil liberties and press freedoms. One of the most important aspects of democratic system is the kind of fundamental freedoms which people exercise. But what we are seeing is that there is the rise of this hindrances to the exercise of these freedoms. right? So there is the use of draconian laws, draconian provisions. For example, there have been allegations, many have said that in India we have some of these draconian laws such as National Security Act, or we have, for example, UAPA, right? Also, we have in different countries national securities provisions. So they are draconian provisions which tend to restrict the freedom of the people. Next is that they stifle the dissent. See, dissent is very important. There has to be a right to disagree, right? So people can disagree on particular policies or actions. So this is really important. Also, we have the Freedom House report of 2024, which says that world over, it is 18th year consecutively that there is a decline in the fundamental freedoms around the world. Next aspect is polarization and identity politics. World over, be it US, be it China, what we are witnessing is that there is the rise of polarization. Now, let's talk about US. So in the US, what we saw in the first presidential term, in the first presidential campaign of Trump, including the second one, what we saw that the society, the American society was deliberately divided between the whites and the blacks. What we call as the rise of neo-Nazis or the rise of white supremacists, right? So this is a very serious concern. Also, we have in other countries, for example, let's talk about Myanmar, right? Over there is alleged persecution of Rohingyas. So this is a very serious concern. Now, it's not just on the basis of religion. For example, in US, what we see is the race, right? What we see is the color. It can be ethnicity. It can be language. It can be what we call as the linguistic barriers, right? Divisions in the society. Ultimately, the very objective is to use these factors for majoritarianism. And this basically suppresses the right of minorities. Minority, I'm not just talking about the religious minorities. I'm also talking about the linguistic minorities or some other sections of society which do not have adequate numbers. So that is where the rights of the minorities suffer. Then there is the weakening of democratic institutions. These institutions which were meant to uphold the principles of equality, which were meant to uphold the principles of impartiality, they have been politicized. What I mean to say is, let's take the case of election commissions around the world. There have been many countries where the election commissions are actually doing in a way which has been said by their political masters. Or let's talk about the judiciary. The judiciary is delivering those verdicts which are actually in line with what the political masters are saying. So there is the politicization of these important institutions. Lack of accountability and transparency within the working of these systems, working of these institutions. Next is economic inequality. Especially after 1990s, India also saw the LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization. What we thought that every section of the society is going to bear some benefits. But the kind of economic growth we witnessed was very unequal. That is, we have a certain section of the society, right, which is a minuscule proportion, which is very less, and that is commanding, that is having a command over the economic resources, over the incomes, over the wealth, right? So it has led to divisions, deepening of the divisions with respect to income and wealth. Also, what you need to understand is that the kind of opportunities which people have, people are studying. First of all, people do not have adequate skills. Even when people have adequate skills, they do not have adequate jobs with them. So there is the growing concern with respect to discontent, right? So people are more discontented. They're not satisfied. And ultimately what happens is they fall prey to these emotional, public speeches by the political masters. Take what happened in Germany after First World War. We had Adolf Hitler. What Hitler did, he tried to exploit the cultural aspect. See, people do not have the adequate jobs, right? The economic conditions was very bad. So ultimately what Hitler did, he tried to exploit what he called as folk, right? That is, you need to have pride in the German culture. So again, that can be true, but ultimately that has no rational basis, right? So there has to be a rational basis, which I'm trying to say. Again, what you need to understand is, also according to the World Inequality Report of 2022, what it says that we have 10% of people which are commanding in India 52% of the income, right? So just imagine 10% having 52% of the income. That is deep inequality in the society. Next aspect is spread of disinformation and digital manipulation. As I already told you, disinformation is the deliberate act of making that information false, so as to create chaos in the society, so as to exploit the divisions in the society. There has been the rise of disinformation. You must have seen the WhatsApp University As soon as we open the WhatsApp, sometimes we have these messages, right? And again, these messages, they create a sense of hatred in the mind of people, knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or subconsciously. You have this notion in your mind, right? And ultimately, these messages have no rational basis. So the only aim of these messages, let's say on the other platforms, is to create panic in the society, is to create hatred in the society. So social media is being exploited. The role of social media is to basically integrate people. That was the kind of ideal which we had for social media. But for what it is being exercised? To create more divisions in the society. Next, we had the 2018 Cambridge Analytica scandal, where what was observed was that this particular consulting firm, this used the data of Facebook to exploit, to give undue advantage to political parties around the world, right? Next, we have weak global democratic leadership. Now, see, we had some of these countries. Take, for example, United States of America. At one point of time, USA, spearheaded the movement that we need to have free and fair markets. There have to be democracies around the world. What it is doing right now? So there is a retreat of these democratic tendencies. Take what Donald Trump is doing. He's talking about make America great again, at the cost of disrupting the global economy, at the cost of making the least developed countries suffer, at the cost of making these developing countries like India suffer. So again, that is what the aggressive nationalism is all about. Retreat of traditional champions. And also, this is visible in EU. Take, for example, we have countries like Hungary or Poland, where what we are seeing is the undermining of judicial freedom, undermining of press freedom, right? Growth of authoritarian powers. We have, for example, let's say the Chinese nationalism. We have Chinese leader who is talking about the Chinese nationalism, saying that China is, what we generally say is that China has a middle kingdom syndrome. It does not consider other countries at the same level, at the same parity, right? Also, we have, for example, let's talk about Donald Trump. So there is the rise of aggressive nationalism around the world. See, what can be the way forward? The very first is strengthening the democratic institutions. There have to be adequate focus upon the independence and accountability of different institutions, be it the judiciary, be it the election commissions, be it the media. There have to be proper independence and accountability of what these institutions are doing, right? Next, there have to be the system of checks and balance. See, in India, and this is a very beautiful aspect of Indian governance framework, we do not have strict separation of power. What we have is a system of checks and balance. What do we mean by that? What it means is that whenever you have, we have three organs of the state. We have the judiciary, we have the legislature, we have the executive. Whenever any of these organs of the state overstep its boundary, we'll have the other organ coming and restricting it. Let's say we have the parliament passing a particular law, which infringes upon the fundamental rights of the people, which breaks the boundaries. So what judiciary would do? Judiciary would declare it as ultra vires, as null and void. So this is a kind of checks and balance we have. So this should be enhanced. That is how we can increase the accountability. We can increase the transparency in the system. We can make the whole system more independent. Civic education and democratic culture. We have Scandinavian countries. We have Sweden, Norway. What they do is from the very starting, they try to imbibe, they try to infuse democratic ideals in the minds of children. And their curriculum, they talk about democracy, they talk about fundamental freedoms. That should be practiced all around the world, right? Promoting awareness with respect to these rights, with respect to the importance of having free and fair system. Critical thinking and tolerance. This is very important, right? So as I just talked about the WhatsApp University, whenever you see such a message, which is trying to create hatred in the society, please ask yourself a question. Is it even rational? What is the logic behind that particular message? What is the reason? So they do not give the reasons, right? But they just talk about these things, right? And which cause chaos in the society. So what you need to emphasize upon the increased aspect of critical thinking. Critical thinking must be encouraged, right? And also tolerance. Tolerance is very important aspect. Support for independent media and civil society. Very important. See, we have, for example, ProPublica in US, which exposes, it's a particular non-governmental organization, ProPublica, which tries to expose the corruptions in different domains. So we should give impetus to such organizations. That is really important. Take, for example, the beautiful case of Right to Information Act, RTI, in India. Right? We also have a particular article in today's newspaper where the Union Minister has said that, this amendment would not affect the RTI. Let's see what happens. But these instruments or these institutions, they need to be protected. They need to be made more robust. That is what the way forward is, right? Also, the civil society is very important. We need to have these watchdogs, NGOs, regulating the big techs and digital spaces. See, what we are seeing is that there is a growing nexus between these big tech firms, Google or some other firms, Amazon, and the political leaders of some countries. And again, what is happening is that they are trying to exploit the user data for their political gains. So again, this illegal nexus has to be done away with. How is that possible? By having proper data regulations, by having strict guidelines with respect to digital privacy. For example, we have GDPR, Global Data Protection Regime in European Union. So such things which basically try to give importance to the individual right must be enhanced. Then we have inclusive economic policies. You must have seen what happened in Paris. So we had the Yellow Vests movement in Paris, Yellow Vest movement, or what happened in 2019 in Chile. So people, see again, people are really tensed because they're unemployed. They do not have, or they're underemployed. They're not earning enough. They have stagnating wages, which is affecting their mental well-being. So again, that is one of the leading causes of chaos in the society. That is one of the leading causes of social distrust in the society. So again, we have to focus upon creating adequate jobs, good quality jobs. That is really important. Inclusive economic policies, for example, let's talk about the progressive taxation. This has to be increased, right? Or creating good quality jobs. Next, international cooperations and democratic solidarity. This is again very important. Let's take the case of Myanmar, right? So many of these democratic countries like US or European countries have said that we are going to place sanctions. Now, this is one thing which is quite good, right? Because in order to control a particular state, if a state is persecuting its citizens, be it on the basis of caste, religion, or any other thing, this is something which needs to be stopped. So what we can do is we can have a stricter guidelines with respect to sanctions on that particular country by different countries. Specifically, what is really needed is sanctions by United Nations. That is really important. Alliances can be developed. Alliances for democracies can be developed. For example, we had Summit for Democracy, right? Diplomatic and economic costs should be imposed on those countries which are not following the ideals of democracy, right? So this is what the gist of the article is. You can use these points while writing an essay, or you can even use these points while writing a particular GS2 question paper. So again, the way forward is that we have to focus upon these areas. We have to make sure that there is increased democratic ideals in the society. We abide by the democratic principles. And again, these tendencies, be it polarization, be it social conflicts, be it the divisions on the lines of religion or caste, this is not good for any society, right? So we have to basically try to curb this and go with a proper democratic tradition. Now, let's have a mains practice question. The global decline of liberal democracies reflects deeper structural and institutional challenges rather than just the rise of authoritarian leaders. Critically examine the causes behind the democratic backsliding around the world and suggest measures to strengthen the democratic institutions and values. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. And again, if you are liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button and let us know through the comments. Let's go to the second topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to beyond algorithms, social security for gig workers. Just try to understand this. What we have seen is the evolution of employee-employer relationships. What I mean to say is, previously we had a particular traditional model where we had the employer and the employer both bound by a particular contract. Then there emerged new worker segments, for example, domestic workers. And now at this point of time, what we are witnessing is disruption in the technological domain and the rise of a new category of workforce, which is the gig workers. But one of the very important and serious concerns with respect to gig workers is that they do not get the adequate social security measures. They do not get the benefit of these social security measures. Now, this is a very serious concern because having adequate social security concern is a very important part of quality of the job, right? So that is really very important. In line with that, we had the government coming up with the Code on Social Security, which has not been implemented till date. According to the author, what she says is that even this code suffers from various lacunae, various loopholes. For example, that there are huge numbers of ambiguous definitions in the particular code. Then there's the issue of watered down protections, right? So the kind of protections which are being given, they're quite narrow in nature. Then there are issues with respect to implementation. Labor being a concurrent subject, there are issues with respect to implementation between the central government and the state government. Now, also, one more important aspect which I want to highlight is that the government has been coming up with these social security measures as a kind of a reaction to the emergence of new worker categories. Again, understand. We had the traditional setup. The government came up with numerous laws and policies. Then we had, for example, the domestic workers. The government again thought of coming up with a particular law. Now we are having gig workers. The government is now thinking to come up with adequate social security measures for these gig workers. The conclusion is that the policies of the government are reactive in nature. They are based on a specific worker segment. What the author is trying to say is, why not having a universal framework for the social security of these gig workers, including all the unorganized workers, right? So that is the crux. We should basically have a transformation from this reactive policy towards a proactive policies which caters to all segments of the society, that is the workers, right? That is what the gist of the article is. We'll see what gig economy is all about, what are the issues, and what can be the way forward. Part of GS3 Indian economy. Now, again, what is a gig economy? See, let's say we have a traditional setup. In a traditional setup, you have the employee and you have the employer. Both are bound by contract. And in such a setup, what you generally have is the nature of the job is quite permanent in nature, relatively more permanent. And the employee is entitled to certain social security benefits, be it the pension benefit, be it the insurance benefit, or be it, for example, the maternity benefit. On the other hand, the gig economy is a kind of a labor market scenario where the nature of the work is short-term, freelance or contract-based work, right? Again, what you need to understand is that why we have seen a rise of the gig economy is primarily because of the rise in the technological disruptions, the rise of online platforms, be it the ride-hailing services like Uber, Ola, or be it these food delivery apps, Swiggy, Zomato, right? So again, what is happening is because of the rise of these online platforms, there is a rise of these gig workers. Now, this represents a shift towards a more flexible, task-based and on-demand workforce. See, not everything is bad with gig economy, and we'll discuss the reasons that many aspects of the gig economy are quite good also, right? Because it provides more flexibility to the employer, to that particular person. And again, understand, in this particular setup, we do not call that person who is working as a gig worker as an employee. That is a very important thing which you should know. We do not call that particular person as an employee because he or she is not bound by a particular contract. Over there, what you need to understand is that they are termed as independent contractors or freelancers or part-time workers. You must have seen the kind of person, the person who comes at your doorstep bringing that biryani, right? So you call that person as delivery partner. The company calls him as delivery partner. So that is the kind of words which we are actually, nomenclature which we are using for these gig workers. Let's have a look towards some important data. Now this data, the source is from Niti Aayog, right? What it says is that almost 77 lakh Indians are currently in the gig economy, right? 77 lakh. India is projected to have almost 2.35 crores gig workers by 2030. Understand? So we'll have almost 2.4 crore people working in the gig economy, right? So we have numerous platforms. We have Dunzo, we have Swiggy, we have Zomato, which are actually one of the very important pillars of this gig economy. Sector-wise, let's say we have 2.7 million, 27 million Indians gig workers are engaged in retail, trade and sales. Let's say we have retail trade. For example, we have the Reliance Smart or we have the Chroma, we have these outlets, right? 1.3 million Indian gig workers are engaged in the transportation sector. Almost 6 lakh Indian workers are in the manufacturing sector. 6 lakhs Indian gig workers are in the finance and insurance sector. 2.5 million Indian gig workers are engaged in e-commerce, just for the sake of, having a broad idea. Now, let's also talk about this. So we have the key sectors, for example, transport and logistics. We have companies like Uber, Ola, ride-hailing services, right? Food delivery and e-commerce. We all know we have Zomato, Swiggy, right? Then we have personal services. For example, we have Urban Company providing the bathroom cleaning, all these things. Freelancers. Now, again, understand, very important aspect. Whenever we have this image of gig economy, what we think is that gig economy is all bad, right? And it only comprises of these gig workers, these delivery partners who come at our doorstep. But that is not the case. The gig economy also includes that section of the society, those workers who are highly skilled, right? So they do work on a project basis. So they're highly skilled people. They're not working for a particular company. They're working for different projects. They're working for different companies on a project basis. So the gig economy also includes such people who are actually paid a very good remuneration, right? So that you should understand. For example, we have designers, writers, software developers on different platforms. For example, we have Upwork. Then healthcare and education. We have online tutors, telemedicine professionals, right? Demographics. Let's talk about the demographics. See, When I look at the demography of the kind of person who are working in the gig economy in India, most of them are young, right? So most of the gig workers are in the age bracket of 18 to 35 years of age. Just have a look at this from businesstoday.in, right? So breakdown of the gig workforce in India. So we have almost 32% from 19 to 25 years, 20% from 41 to 60 years, 48% from 26 to 40 years. Majority of them are in that bracket, in that demographic dividend, young population, right? Skill levels, gig workers range from low skilled, for example, we have the delivery partners, to highly skilled, for example, the software developers. Look at this. So in India, when I try to break up on the basis of skills, what you need to understand is more than 70% are either from the low skilled or medium skilled. There are very few people who are highly skilled gig workers. Just look at this. Low skilled, for example, 31%, cab drivers, delivery partners, pickers, packers. Then we have medium skilled, for example, electricians, carpenters, beauticians, right? Then we have highly skilled, for example, the consultants, administrative assistants, graphic designers. So that is a kind of breakdown on the basis of the skills which people have. Now, if I talk about the income, so we have a very minuscule of the gig workers, very small numbers, which are earning quite good. But most of the gig workers in the country, they're not earning enough, right? And that is a very serious concern. Now, what are the factors driving the growth of gig economy in the country? So what has led to the rise of gig economy culture in India? Let's talk about this. The very first is increased smartphone and internet penetration. There's no doubt about it. According to the TRAI report, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India report of 2024, in India, there are almost 880 million smartphone users, internet users, right? 880 million means almost 88 crore people using internet, right? So there has been an exponential increase in the number of internet users around the country. Now, again, understand, most of the platforms which are employing these gig workers, they are online platforms. Once you'll have the rise in the internet access, definitely you will see a massive jump in the gig workers employed on these platforms. Now, there are two ways to look at this picture. Once you'll have increased internet access, the companies who are providing these services, they would be in a position to contact these workers. On the other hand, these companies would also be in a position to cater to more consumers. So at the consumer end and also at the worker end. That you should understand. Next, changing work preferences, priority to flexibility and balance. Especially the millennials, right? So previously we used to give more importance to standard of life. But these millennials, what generally we see is that they are giving more importance to the quality of life. See, there's a difference between standard of life and quality of life, right? They want to have a more flexible work culture. They want to have that kind of work scenario where they work on a project basis according to their own timelines, right? So they decide that this is going to be my timeline and I'm going to deliver this particular project at this particular time frame. So they can do that particular work at any point of time. That is the kind of flexibility they want. Also, for example, we have work from home, right? Or other things. So there is the increase of the kind of flexibility which people want. And that has given an acceleration to the gig economy because this provides that. Rise of e-commerce and startup culture. We already know that India is one of the largest destinations with respect to startup ecosystems around the world. Just before a few days, I had the discussion about the startups. So we are the third largest startup ecosystem around the world. Most of these startups, as I already told you, they are based on online platforms. So they are getting new consumers every day, right? They're getting new customers. So as the demand is increasing, definitely the numbers of gig workers who are employed on these platforms, it is also increasing. Next, consumer demand for convenient and quick services. What we are trying to say is that we are more inclined to have that quick delivery. People are, in fact, they're not that patient. Now what they want is, they want to just click on the button and have that 10 minutes delivery. They do not want to go outside and get that product by themselves. So there's a rise of this culture, rise of this consumerism, which is in a way is giving an impetus to the overall gig economy. Next aspect is abundance of low cost labor. See, India is a labor surplus economy. We have huge labor. On the one hand, we have huge labor. On the other hand, we do not have adequate, good quality jobs. Also, most of the people, they are low skilled. So what is best for them? What they think is that even if I get a particular job as a delivery partner, I would join it. Because there is the less job in the market. We do not have good quality jobs. We do not have adequate manufacturing capacity. We have a very good base in the services sector. But again, understand, most of the people who are employed in the services sector, they have good skill base. But we have a huge chunk of the population who does not possess that skill base. So ultimately, the option they have is to join these platforms, right? So that is one of the important factors for driving the gig economy in the country. Now, let's talk about the major challenges faced by the gig workers in India. The very first is lack of basic rights and social security, as I already told you. See, since there is no formal contract, there's no formal relationship between the employer and the employer in the gig economy. What happens is that we have these gig workers who are not entitled to some of the very important social security benefits, be it the pension benefit, be it the maternity benefit, be it the insurance benefit. So they're not entitled to that. And ultimately, it is a very serious concern. Next is precarious employment and income insecurity. Again, understand the demand of these workers on these platforms is based on demand. Right? As the demand of the commodity or that particular good or services which is being sold on that platform, it increases, you'll have more number of gig workers joining. But as the demand would go down, definitely there would be more layoffs of these people. So the situation is quite precarious in nature, that you need to understand. And the kind of income they're earning is quite meager, it's quite less in nature. Next is algorithmic management, very important aspect. You must have seen whenever you travel through Uber or Ola, that the driver is saying that I have more rides to make. See, again, the kind of functioning with respect to these gig workers is based on a particular software, is based on a particular algorithm. Now, there is almost no human intervention with respect to that algorithm. And ultimately, what happens is that it is that particular software or that algorithm which guides, which dictates that particular person, that gig worker, that you have these remaining tasks. Even if the person is overworked, is overexploited, that person has to fulfill those tasks. So again, understand, it leads to the exploitation and unfair treatment of these gig workers. That is a very serious concern. Next aspect is health and safety risks. Just before a few days, we had the IMD saying that there is the huge possibility of rising temperatures. We're going to have heat waves. Just imagine those people on the bikes who are delivering your food or who are like having the ride hailing, let's say on the bikes. So again, the kind of risks which these people face, it's quite high, specifically the health risk. Let's say you have torrential rains. So these people, they travel on bikes or sometimes even on bicycles, delivering food. So they are suffering from huge risks and ultimately it affects their life. Also, sometimes to the extent that they meet with accidents and they do not have the adequate insurance cover. So their whole family, sometimes what happens is you have that particular person as a sole breadwinner of the family. And sometimes because of the accident, people also succumb, people die. And this affects the whole family setup. Next aspect is lack of collective bargaining power. See, in traditional setup, what we have is we have unions who can basically who can come together and have a common voice. But in this particular setup, we do not have this kind of phenomena of unionism. So ultimately, there is no bargain. There is no aspect of bargaining which is involved in this particular aspect. And ultimately, it is the gig worker who suffers. Digital divide and skill gaps. See, we understand that these gig workers are ultimately using these platforms, online platforms. But they do not have, good knowledge with respect to how to operate these different apps. They only have limited set of skills, which just make them, do these transactions or do these activities. So there has to be a proper impetus given on the skill training of these people in these very apps so that they can have a particular upward social mobility. If you're not going to upskill them, definitely they're going to continue with that particular position. So you need to properly skill them. You need to upskill them. Now, what have been the government initiatives and schemes? Now, we had the code on social security, again, has not been implemented and there are huge issues. Extending social security benefits, the aspect of this particular code on social security is to extend the social security benefits to the unorganized sections of the society, including the gig workers. We have a particular social security fund, which would have contributions from the gig worker as well as the employer, as well as these platforms. So that is what you need to understand. The author in this particular article highlights few issues with respect to this particular code on social security, which I've already told you that it has ambiguous definitions. Next aspect is watered down protections. So the kind of protections which are being offered in the code on social security, they are very few and it's quite narrow. And again, there are implementation challenges because of the center state aspects. Next aspect which you need to understand is that we have the e-Shram portal, which the government has come up with. Now, the very objective of e-Shram portal is to register these unorganized workers, including the gig workers. And once they register, they would be given a universal identification number. And through that particular e-Shram portal, they would be in a better position to access different social security schemes by the government. That is the very objective of e-Shram portal. As of 2023, over 280 million unorganized workers have registered on the platform, a very good initiative. Next, we have Skill India and Digital India initiatives. The very objective is to upskill the people, as I already told you. Once people would be upskilled, they would be in a better position to have that social mobility, to have good quality jobs, and ultimately earn a higher amount. That is the very objective of skilling and digital literacy programs, access better opportunities. Next, we have the state government initiatives. See, very important aspect, understand. Many states in India have come up with welfare boards. Welfare boards with respect to a particular work segment. For example, let's say the building and constructions. For example, we have BD and cigarettes. So the workers who are working in this particular domain, they are having their welfare boards. But the author has highlighted very important issues. But before that, what you understand is that the welfare boards in different states. For example, we have the case in Karnataka. Karnataka's welfare board has helped many of these gig workers to have social security. Many a times what happened is that in an accident, the people succumbed. And the welfare board, it helped to give that particular amount to that family, right? So it has definitely helped to cater to the aspirations, to the needs of that particular gig worker, definitely. Now, what are the issues which are highlighted by the author in this particular article? What she says is that there was a right to information petition, which said that we have a particular welfare board for building and other construction workers for various states. Now, they collected a particular cess. The total amount collected was to the tune of 70,000 crores, more than 70,000 crores, the cess for the building and other construction workers. But till now, that amount has not been utilized by the welfare boards for these workers. 70,000 crores. Can you just imagine? Next aspect which the author says is that according to a report by Comptroller and Auditor General of 2024, there has been, in Tamil Nadu, we have 99 local bodies in different districts. They have been unable to basically give the remittances to these welfare boards to the tune of almost 222 crores. That is the issue. So we have the Tamil Nadu Construction Workers Welfare Board. So it has not got the adequate funding. So there are issues with these welfare boards, and this is quite important because in the Code on Social Security, the most important institution which would serve the needs of these gig workers would be the welfare board. And again, so we have to make these welfare boards more robust. Next aspect, we have the labor welfare schemes. For example, we have Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Man Dhan Yojana, which aims to give the pensions after that particular unorganized worker reaches the age of 60. So this is a social security benefit. So there have been many schemes which have been rolled for the unorganized workers, including the gig workers. Now, what should be the way forward? See, this is very important. You have to basically make the amendments to the legal definition. That is, you have to treat this particular gig worker as an employee, so that that person is able to access various social security benefits, be it the insurance, be it the maternity benefit. So there is the aspect of legal clearance. There has to be a clarity with respect to the definition. Next aspect is improving the social security coverage. So we have the Code on Social Security, but still it is not implemented, primarily because of the issues. See, labor is a concurrent subject, and we have the states and center who are having issues with respect to the implementation on Code on Social Security. So these frictions should be basically solved as soon as possible so that we can have a faster implementation of this Code on Social Security. Next, minimum wage and work hour regulations. Very, very important. In order to avoid the exploitation and unfair treatment of these gig workers, there have to be a proper minimum wage setup. There have to be limited hour. There have to be work hour regulation with respect to these gig economy. Very important, because what you see is these gig workers, they're overworked. They're working for more than 12 hours. And still, they have a lot of tasks to do. So that is a very serious concern. Digital and financial literacy programs, again, very important. We have Skill India mission. We have different programs focusing upon the upskilling of these people. That is really important so that they can have that social mobility by having good quality jobs. Next aspect is that of platform accountability. What we are trying to say is that there have to be adequate transparency with respect to the working of the algorithm, so that the algorithm is not just irrationally giving the task to the people. There have to be adequate human interventions. There have to be fair compensation. There have to be a very robust grievance redressal mechanism, so that if a worker feels that he is being overworked, he is being exploited, he can have a particular channel through which he can address, he can raise his concern, and a proper redressal is given. Next, welfare boards and worker cooperatives, again very important. Those states which have not really established these welfare boards, they should come up with new proposals. They should establish these welfare boards so that they can cater to the aspirations of these gig workers. Next aspect is health and safety standards. Very important. There have to be a proper health management system of these gig workers in these online companies. So these online companies, these platforms need to have their own robust health management system for these gig workers. Let's say a person is suffering from heat wave, or let's say the person has suffered the accidental injuries. So adequate care, prompt care must be given to those persons. Again, what we are saying is definitely the gig economy is a kind of a disruption in the overall employment setup. But this has had many advantages, right? For example, it provides that flexibility. It provides that comfort to the workers. But there are many issues, primarily because of the lack of social security benefits to these gig workers. So we need to adequately focus upon this particular area, a very important topic. Let's have the mains practice question. Gig economy in India offers great potential to transform the overall labor market and enhance the economic returns. However, it faces some serious challenges which need adequate policy response. Discuss. 15 marks, 250 words. Also, we have a particular previous year question paper which had a particular question with respect to gig economy. It says, examine the role of gig economy in the process of empowerment of women in India. Just see how UPSC is trying to frame question with respect to the empowerment of women, right? So again, it is a kind of mix of different aspects. So what we see over here is that we have a particular societal aspect which is being asked from a particular area of economy, that is a gig economy, right? So that is how you have to basically get your content ready. Let's go to the simplified section. So coming to the simplified section, we have the first topic which talks about the National Investigation Agency, one of the very important law enforcement agencies in the country. Now, the gist of the article is that we have a particular person, Tahavvur Rana. Now, this person was one of the very key conspirators behind the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks of 2008, along with the mastermind, David Coleman Headley. Now, see, this person was in USA. India asked for extradition, and this person has been extradited now to India. And we have the NIA who has arrested this particular person. One thing you need to understand is that in 2008, when this attack was carried out against India did not have a particular agency, a robust agency which could have carried out proper investigation. So there was this lack of having a robust investigative aspect on the lines of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the US. So therefore, we had a particular act of the parliament which led to the formation of National Investigation Agency. The whole objective of National Investigation Agency is to basically prosecute, is to investigate those cases which affect the sovereignty and integrity of the country, right? So it's a very powerful, a very important body, and we'll talk about that. Let's have a look at the article. Tahavvur Hussain Rana, the Pakistani origin Canadian American, wanted for his role in 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks conspiracy, was brought to Delhi. Extradition from the US and formally arrested by the National Investigation Agency. The court reserved orders on the NIA plea seeking 20-day custody of Rana. Born in Pakistan, Rana studied in Pakistani Military Academy in Hassan Abdal in Pakistan's Punjab province, where he became friends with David Coleman Headley, that is Dawood Gilani, the Lashkar-e-Taiba operative who conducted the reconnaissance of the Mumbai attacks between November 26 and 29, 2008, right? Let's talk about the NIA. The National Investigation Agency was established under the NIA Act of 2008. So it is a statutory organization, do remember. It's a central agency formed to investigate some of the serious offenses which affect the sovereignty, security, and integrity of the nation. So it's a very powerful body and a very, very important agency. It also investigates the cases related to the friendly relations with the foreign nations and offenses under the legislation which was established to implement the international treaties, agreements, conventions of the United Nations, its agencies, and the other international organizations. Now, one thing which you should understand is that if NIA wants, it can also transfer a particular case to the state government for the investigation. If it thinks that the state government is in a position to investigate that particular case, it can definitely do so. NIA can transfer the investigation of the case to the state government with the approval of the central government. It may also be directed to take up the case if the central government is of the opinion that the particular offense, the scheduled offense, has been committed outside India. let's say the preparation, the planning of that particular offense was carried out outside India. So the central government would ask the NIA to investigate that particular offense, what we call as extraterritorial jurisdiction. So very, very important. Remember this. It is empowered to probe into any such incidents like bomb blasts, which happened in 2611, hijacks of aircrafts, ships, and other terror activities. The NIA Amendment Act, very, very important. So we had a particular amendment in 2019, which expanded the scope of investigation of the NIA, which increased the number of scheduled offenses which can now be investigated by the NIA, right? Has further enhanced the jurisdiction of the agency to probe various other cases. For example, human trafficking, counterfeiting notes. You must have heard about FICN, fake Indian currency notes, a very prominent TV series also featured the fake Indian currency notes, right? So that is what the issue. And this is something which basically affects the very backbone of Indian economy. So it's a very serious offense. Cyber terrorism. Then this particular agency, NIA, is empowered to investigate and prosecute certain offenses committed outside India, in line with the international treaties and the rules and regulations of those countries. The NIA Amendment Act 2019 allowed the state governments to designate a particular session court as a special court by issuing notification in the official gazette to carry out a trial of certain offences provided in the schedule. So you can have a particular state government basically saying that this particular session court would now act as a special court for the trial of the particular offense for that against that particular individual who has alleged to committed that particular offense. So very, very powerful body. Do read about it. Probably a question can come in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the nutrition aspect of children, and we will talk about two very important schemes of the government. One is PM POSHAN and the other is ICDS. Now, please understand that adequate nutrition is really very important for children. We have the National Family Health Survey 5, which talks about the levels of stunting, the levels of wasting, the levels of undernourishment, which we have in the country. We have a lot of segment, more than 50% of the population of the women in the country between the age of 15 and 49 years who are anemic, right? So nutrition, adequate nutrition is really very important for the overall development of that particular child, including the cognitive development of that particular student, right? So we'll talk about this, and this particular article has all the relevant information. If you just give a reading through it, you'll get to know a lot from it. The material cost for the cooking hot meals in the school under PM POSHAN has been enhanced by 9.5%. So what we get from this is that the very objective of PM POSHAN is to provide adequate quality of nutrition food to the students. And this has been on the basis of inflation index, causing an additional cost of almost 1,000 crores, almost to the tune of 1,000 crores for the financial year 2025-26. In Bal Vatikas and primary schools, the daily material cost for a student will be raised from 6.19 rupees to 6.78 rupees. And upper primary schools from the 9.29 rupees to 10.17, right? Though in specific terms, it might look very small, but when you have a cumulative view, so it has a lot of burden on the exchequer, right? So it tunes to almost 954 crores. Now, these rates of material cost are the minimum mandatory rates. However, the states and union territories are free to contribute more than their prescribed share. So you also have different state governments who are contributing their own resources in order to come up with more better nutrition foods for the students. So they are basically adding on the already designated packages by the center. They're adding on to that, right? Have been contributing more than their minimum mandatory share for their own resources, for providing meals with augmented nutrition under the PM POSHAN scheme. So the very objective of PM POSHAN scheme is what? To provide the nutrition to the students. And you have some of the other states also providing additional resources for augmented nutrition. That is what you have to understand. Bal Vatikas and primary students are provided 20 gram of pulses, 50 gram of vegetables, 5 gram of oil, while upper primary students need 30 gram, 75 gram and 7.5 gram respectively. Again, you need not to memorize this. This is just for the sake of understanding that what are the components which are catered to. The centrally sponsored scheme. What kind of scheme PM POSHAN is? It's a centrally sponsored scheme. That is, we have contributions from both the center as well as state, right? Now, what is central sector scheme? Do write in the comment section. The centrally sponsored scheme serves one hot cooked meal to 11.2 crore students studying in Bal Vatikas and from classes 1 to 8 in 10.36 lakh government and aided schools on all school days. Just look at the number, the quantum of schools being served. through this particular scheme. I will again repeat, the centrally sponsored scheme serves one hot cooked meal to 11.2 crore students studying in Balvatikas and from classes 1 to 8 in 10.36 lakh government and aided schools on all school days. The scheme aims at providing nutritional support and enhancing the school participation of students. One of the very important ways to retain the students in the school is to provide them the adequate nutrition. Because most of the students who are coming to these schools, their parents do not have the adequate economic capacity. And what it leads to the dropouts of the students. So the best way to retain them is to send them to schools. And see, even if the reason is the food, they would sit there for some time. And again, in that line, they would definitely learn many things. So that is a very objective. The center also provides about 26 lakh tons of food grains to the Food Corporation of India. It bears 100% cost of food grains, including the subsidy of approximately 9,000 crore a year and 100% transportation cost from the FCI depots, Food Corporation of India depots to school. So again, this is in addition to the cost being borne by the center for the PM POSHAN. So in addition to that, it is also doing the transportation of this particular food grains, right? The per meal cost after adding all components, including the food grains cost, comes to approximately 12.13 rupees for Balvatikas and primary classes and 17.62 for upper primary. That is a kind of per student cost which the center government is actually bearing. Now, let's also talk about the ICDS, very important, Integrated Child Development Scheme. Now, this scheme provides for supplementary nutrition, immunization, preschool education to the children. And again, the very objective is to cater to the newborns, to cater to the pregnant and lactating mothers, right? A very, very important scheme was launched in the year 1975 and is touted as and is seen as world's largest program for providing integrated package of services for holistic development of child. ICDS is again a centrally sponsored scheme where you have contributions from the center as well as the states and implemented by the state governments and union territories. The scheme has been renamed as Anganwadi Services. The services are now offered as a part of Saksham Anganwadi and POSHAN 2.0. Now, what are the objectives? To improve the nutritional and health outcomes of the children from the age of 0 to 6 years, to lay the foundation for proper psychological, physical and social development of the child, that is emphasizing on even the cognitive development of the child, to reduce the incidence of mortality, morbidity, malnutrition and school dropout, to achieve the effective coordination of policy and implementation amongst the various departments to promote child development and to enhance the capability of the mother to look after the normal health and nutritional needs of the child through proper nutrition and health education. Now, these are the beneficiaries: children between the age group of 0 to 6, pregnant women, lactating mothers, adolescent girls 14 to 18 years in aspirational districts and northeastern states. Very, very important. Just see what kind of benefits are catered to. Probably a question can come in the prelims that these are the benefits. What are the benefits? What are the different categories of benefits which are catered to by the ICDS? So we have supplementary nutrition, preschool education, health and nutrition education, immunization, health checkups, referral services. Now, different services, as I just told you, supplementary nutrition, adding nutrition to the diets of the children, preschool non-formal education, so as to create a base for their formal education, nutrition and health education, immunization, so as to protect them against different diseases, health checkups and referral services. So this is what you need to understand. Now, there are different services. For example, supplementary nutrition. It is carried out by the Anganwadi workers and Anganwadi helpers. Understand the main ministry which is guiding the ICDS is Ministry of Women and Child Development. Immunization, it is carried out by the auxiliary nurse midwife. Now, this is under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Health checkup, again, by ANMs, or we have the Anganwadi workers. Referral services, we have different components. So just have a glance through it. It would be important. Now, again, as I told you, it's a centrally sponsored scheme. So we have contributions from the states also. All components of the ICDS except supplementary nutrition program are financed through a 60-40 ratio, centers to state. The supplementary nutrition program component was funded through a 50-50 ratio. The northeastern states have a 90-10 ratio. So that is because of the disadvantages being suffered by the northeastern states, primarily because of their topography and the distance. So we have basically a particular advantage which is given to the northeastern states. That is what you need to know. That's a centrally sponsored scheme. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very, very important article of the Indian Constitution, which is Article 311. Now, this particular Article 311, it basically talks about the dismissal, the removal or reduction of a rank of a person employed in a civil capacity, either in the union or the state. Now, the very objective of Article 311 is to basically provide safeguard against the arbitrary removal or dismissal or reduction of rank. But it has certain exceptions also, right? So we'll talk about those exceptions and we'll see what Article 311 is all about. So we have this news coming from Jammu Kashmir, the Union Territory of Jammu Kashmir. 2 days after Union Home Minister Amit Shah's visit to Jammu Kashmir, Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha dismissed 2 government employees for alleged anti-national activities, and the police searched the premises of the separatists and attached properties of alleged militants in the Union Territory. Invoking sections of Article 311, which bypasses any departmental inquiry and relies solely on security agencies' reports, the 2 terminated employees were identified as Basharat Ahmad Mir, an assistant wireless operator in the Jammu Kashmir Police, and Ishtiaq Ahmad Malik, a senior assistant in the Public Works Department. The duo were terminated for their deep involvement in the anti-national activities and had come to the adverse notice of law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Now, what is Article 311? The very base of Article 311 of India lays down the procedure and the safeguards to be followed before a civil servant can be dismissed, removed or reduced. Do remember these 3 words: dismissed, removed or reduced in rank. However, it does not apply to military personnels. That you have to keep in mind. Now, it provides for constitutional safeguards to civil servants and government employees against arbitrary dismissal, removal or reduction in rank. The provision ensures that employees are given a fair opportunity to defend themselves. Article 311 specifically deals with dismissal, removal or reduction in rank. It does not talk about the suspension or transfer. So if there's a prelim statement which says Article 311 talks about the suspension and transfers, it is incorrect. It only talks about the dismissal, the removal and reduction of rank. The probationary officers do not enjoy the same level of protection as the permanent employees. Article 311 as confirmed employees. Therefore, those on probation can be dismissed without an inquiry. Article 311 subclause 2 subclause B, very important, allows the president or the governor to waive off the inquiry process. So inquiry would not be deemed necessary if holding such an inquiry is not feasible due to concerns over public security or efficient functioning of the government services. So invoking this particular clause, we have had the dismissal of these officials, right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to a very important law enforcement agencies, which is the Narcotics Control Bureau. So NCB has seized almost 30 kgs of methamphetamine, meth tablets worth 24.32 crores in Assam. So we'll see what the substance is all about and we'll see what is the very objective of Narcotics Control Bureau. The Narcotics Control Bureau seized 30.4 kg of methamphetamine tablets worth 24.32 crores and arrested 3 accused during 2 separate operations in Assam Silchar. Note that this was a joint operation, so we had CRPF also in it. The banned substance is popularly known as Yaba tablets. So we had the NCB, we had the Assam Police, and we have the CRPF, and this was a joint operation. So we have this methamphetamine. Methamphetamine, what we call as meth for short. It's a very addictive stimulant drug. It's a powder that can be made into a pill or a shiny rock called crystal. The powder can be eaten or snorted up the nose. It also can be mixed with the liquid and injected into your body with a needle. Crystal meth is smoked in a small glass pipe. Now, see, this first causes a good feeling, right? That's the reason people consume it. But then it causes a huge lot of problems, right? Plethora of problems. But then users feel edgy, overly excited, angry, or afraid. Meth use can quickly lead to addiction. It causes medical problems, including making your body temperature so high so that you pass out, severe itching, meth mouth, thinking and emotional problems. So this is what you need to know about this particular drug. Maybe there can be a question that what does this word means in the prelims, right? So it's a particular drug. Let's talk about the Narcotics Control Bureau. It's a nodal drug enforcement and intelligence agency under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Do remember, it's under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Now tell me, under which ministry NIA works? Do comment and let me know. It was constituted on 14 November 1985 under the provisions of Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, more commonly known as NDPS Act. It has headquarters in Delhi. The NCB exercises the powers and functions of the central government for taking measures with regard to coordinations of actions by various offices, state governments and other authorities. So we just saw in this particular article that NCB in coordination with the Assam Police, with CRPF has come out with this particular joint operation. Under the NDPS Act and Customs Act, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, implementation of the obligation in respect to countermeasures such as illicit traffic under various international conventions, assistance to the concerned authorities in foreign countries and concerned international organizations, Coordination of actions taken by other concerned ministries, departments, and organizations in respect of matters relating to drug abuse. It also functions as an enforcement agency through its zonal offices. The zonal offices collect and analyze data related to the seizures of narcotics, drugs, and psychotropic substances, study trends, and then it basically coordinates. And then we have the particular operation which is carried out on the basis of the studies being done by the regional offices. This is what you need to know about the Narcotics Control Bureau, very important body. Let's go to the last topic of the day. So coming to the last topic of the day, this is with respect to a very important nuclear watchdog, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. So we have a particular advisor to the Supreme Leader of Iran who has said that we may stop cooperating with IAEA if we'll have continued threats from US. So that is what the leader has said. Iran may suspend the cooperation with United Nations nuclear watchdog if external threats continue, an advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader has said. Continued external threats and putting Iran under the conditions of a military attack could lead to deterrent measures like expulsion of IAEA inspectors and ceasing cooperation with it. Now, we all know that Iran is under strict vigil with respect to the alleged nuclear proliferation. So we have IAEA, which is continuously monitoring and inspecting various sites in Iran. So in that particular light, in the light of US having or pressurizing Iran, we have this particular statement made by a very important advisor to the Supreme Leader of Iran. Now, what is IAEA? Very important agency. It's the world's foremost intergovernmental forum for scientific and technical cooperation in the nuclear field. It works for a safe, secure, and peaceful use of nuclear science. So, which is the agency which works for the peaceful use of nuclear science? It is IAEA. Do remember. It is an autonomous organization within the United Nations. So, it's an autonomous organization within the United Nations. The IAEA carries out the programs to maximize the contribution of nuclear technology to society while verifying its peaceful use. It is widely known as Atoms for Peace and Development Organization within the United Nations family. IAEA reports to both United Nations General Assembly as well as to Security Council, because you have the UNSC, which basically passes the resolution and it is binding on IAEA. The statute of IAEA was approved on 23rd October 1956 by the Conference on the Statute of International Atomic Energy Agency, which was held at the headquarters of United Nations. It came into force on 29 July 1957. Headquarters are in Vienna, Austria. Do remember, membership currently it has 178 member states. Now, talking about the structure of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So we have the General Conference, which consists of all the members, and it meets annually. And this approves the budget and different programs and debate the IAEA's general policies, that what to do, what not to do, what is to be the agenda for the forthcoming year. The Board of Governors, which consists of 35 members, who meets about 5 times per year, is charged with carrying out the agency's statutory functions, approving the safeguards agreements, and appointing the Director General. The day-to-day affairs of the IAEA are run by the Secretariat, which is headed by the Director General. So this is what you need to understand. We have 3 things: General Conference, we have Board of Governors, and we have Director General, the Secretariat. The Secretariat is headed by the Director General. International Atomic Energy Agency's functions. It works with its member states and multiple partners worldwide to promote safe, secure, peaceful use of nuclear technologies. So it also incentivizes different countries to go with peaceful use of nuclear technologies. It applies nuclear safeguards consisting monitoring, inspection, information analysis, and other activities to verify that nuclear activities remain peaceful and detect their and deter their diversion, including to weapon-related aspect. So, see, again, many times what has been found is that in the guise of civilian applications, many countries, in fact, we had some of the allegations that Iran, under the guise of civilian application, was actually enriching uranium for the weapon grade aspect. So this is a very serious threat, and it might lead to nuclear proliferation, which is obviously a threat to the world peace and security. In particular, the IAEA implements comprehensive safeguards and agreements mandated by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, which serves as a first line of defense against nuclear weapons proliferation. IAEA assists member states and promotes the exchange of scientific and technical information. IAEA enhances the national, regional, and international capacities to respond to nuclear and radiological incidents, which is essential to minimizing their impact. So one case in point which I remember is that when you had the Japan's Fukushima disaster, you had the IAEA, which actually gave a lot of recommendations and also inspected after a time period, also inspected that particular site, whether there is a particular radiological emissions or not. So definitely it contributes even to that area of scientific research and technical investigations, right? So that is it for today's discussion. I hope you really enjoyed the session. And if you did, do let us know through your likes and comments. All the best. Thank you so much.